Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say everyone has a doppelganger somewhere in the world. But what if you found 12 of them, sitting in a circle, all staring at you with your own eyes? Before you click away, I need you to understand something. This isn't about twins or lookalikes. This is about what I discovered in the basement of St. Mary's Community Center in Portland, Oregon, and why I can never look in a mirror the same way again. If you're listening to this alone, maybe turn on a light, just in case. The story begins now. The flyer was taped to the bulletin board at Whole Foods, right between a lost cat poster and someone offering guitar lessons. Finding Your True Self, support group for identity issues, it read in plain Arial font. Meeting every Tuesday at 7 p.m. St. Mary's Community Center, room B12. I almost walked past it. Would have, actually, if my therapist, Dr. Chen, hadn't just suggested I try group therapy. Sarah, she'd said during our last session, sometimes healing happens when we realize we're not alone in our struggles. Not alone. If only she knew how those words would haunt me. That first Tuesday in October, I drove to St. Mary's with a knot in my stomach. The community center sat on Burnside Street, one of those old brick buildings that seemed to absorb the Portland rain into its very bones. The parking lot was nearly empty. Just a few cars scattered under the amber streetlights. I sat in my Honda Civic for 5 minutes, engine off, watching my breath fog the windshield. Identity issues. That's what the flyer said. Did I have identity issues? After 32 years of feeling like I was playing a character in my own life. Yeah, maybe I did. The main entrance was locked. A handwritten note directed support group members to the side door. I followed a narrow path between the building and a chain-link fence, my footsteps echoing off the wet concrete. The side door opened to a stairwell that smelled like old coffee and industrial cleaner. Down. The arrow pointed down. Room B12 was in the basement. Of course it was. The fluorescent lights hummed as I descended, that particular frequency that makes your teeth ache if you pay too much attention to it. At the bottom, a long hallway stretched out, doors on either side. B8, B10, B12. I knocked. Waited. Nothing. The doorknob was cold under my hand as I turned it. The room beyond was dimly lit, chairs arranged in a circle. About half were occupied, but I couldn't make out faces in the low light. Everyone seemed to be looking down at their laps. "Welcome," a voice said from across the circle. Soft, familiar somehow. "Please, take a seat. We're about to begin." I chose a chair near the door. Always good to have an exit strategy, right? As my eyes adjusted, I counted the others. 12 people, including the one who'd spoken. All wearing similar dark clothing. All with their heads down. "Let's start with introductions," the facilitator said. Still, that strange, familiar quality to the voice. "I'll go first. My name is Sarah, and I've been struggling with feeling like I don't know who I really am." My breath caught. Sarah, my name, but lots of people are named Sarah. It's common. The third most popular name for girls born in 1992, actually. I'd looked it up once. "I work at Powell's Books," she continued, "in the Pearl District location. I live alone with my cat, Mochi. And lately, I've been feeling like I'm disappearing." Powell's Books, Pearl District. I worked at the downtown location, but still. And Mochi. I'd almost named my cat Mochi, went with Biscuit instead. This was getting weird. "Thank you for sharing, Sarah," someone to her left said. Another woman. "I'm also Sarah. I work at Powell's, the Hawthorne location. I have a cat named Biscuit." The fluorescent light above us flickered. In that strobe-like moment, I saw her face. My face. Not similar, not kind of like me. my exact face down to the small scar above my left eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 7 years old. My hand went to the door handle, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. One by one, they began to lift their heads. Sarah after Sarah after Sarah. All 32 years old, all with shoulder-length brown hair that never quite cooperated with humidity. All with that slightly crooked nose from breaking it in high school volleyball. All me. "Don't be afraid," the facilitator said. She was looking at me now with my own green eyes. Not my color green. My exact eyes. "We've all been where you are right now. The shock, the disbelief. But you're here for a reason. This," my voice cracked, "this isn't possible." "Isn't it?" Another me spoke from across the circle. This one wore glasses. I'd been meaning to get my prescription checked. "You've felt it, haven't you? That sense that you're not quite real, like you're watching your life from the outside." I had. God help me, I had felt exactly that. "We all found the flyer," Glasses Me continued. "All of us Sarahs, all of us lost, and now we're finding ourselves together." I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to get up, get out, get away, but I stayed, because despite the impossibility of it all, they understood. These other Sarahs, they knew exactly what it felt like to go through life feeling like a ghost in your own skin. "The first meeting is always the hardest," the facilitator said. "Let's call her Prime Sarah, just to keep things straight in my head. Why don't we go around the circle, share what brought you here?" They told their stories. Our stories. Sarah from Beaverton, who worked at Powell's in the rare book section. Sarah from Southeast, who worked in the children's department. Sarah from Lake Oswego, from Gresham, from St. John's. All Powell's employees, but different locations, different departments. All living alone with cats that were almost named Mochi, or actually named Biscuit, or Whiskers, or Mr. Darcy. The details were what got to me. Each Sarah had broken her nose playing volleyball, but in slightly different ways. Spiking, blocking, diving for a save. Each had that scar above the left eyebrow, but from bikes, skateboards, ice skating. Like someone had taken my life and run it through a filter, creating variations on a theme. "How?" I finally asked when it came to my turn. "How is this happening?" Prime Sarah smiled. My smile, but sadder. "We're not sure, but we have theories." "Have you ever heard of quantum superposition?" I shook my head. The idea that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Glasses Sarah chimed in. "Some of us think we're collapsed possibilities. Versions of Sarah that could have been, all existing in the same space. That's insane." "Is it more insane than this?" She gestured around the circle. I had no answer for that. The meeting followed a strange rhythm. We shared our days, our identical yet different days. The same customers at different Powell's locations. The same anxiety about turning 33 next spring. The same dream about drowning that we'd all been having since August. That last one made everyone go quiet. "You too?" Sarah from Beaverton whispered. I nodded. "Every Tuesday and Friday, I'm in dark water, and I can see the surface, but when I swim up, there's something in the way, like glass." "A barrier," several Sarahs said in unison. Prime Sarah stood abruptly. "I think that's enough sharing for tonight, same time next week." The others began to file out. I noticed they were careful not to touch each other. When I reached the door, Prime Sarah called out, "The new Sarah, wait." I turned. We were alone now, just two versions of the same person in a dingy basement room. "It gets easier," she said. "The shock, I mean. You'll start to see the benefits." Benefits? We're not alone anymore. We understand each other completely. No more explaining yourself, no more feeling like nobody gets you. We're building something here, a community of Sarahs. "How many are there?" She tilted her head. "Our head. That thing I did when I was thinking. We're not sure. They keep finding the flyer, keep showing up. Started with just 3 of us back in June. The flyer? I pulled it from my pocket. But the paper was blank. No words, no meeting time. Just yellowed paper with tape marks at the corners. Prime Sarah's smile widened. Only Sarah's can see it. Only Sarah's who are ready. I left through that same side door, hurried to my car, but in the parking lot I stopped. 4 Honda Civics, all silver, all with the same Powell's employee parking sticker, all with the same fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror. A gag gift from our best friend Anna last Christmas. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcast, just the sound of rain on the windshield and my own thoughts chasing each other in circles. That night, I dreamed of drowning again. But this time, when I looked up through the dark water, I saw faces pressed against the glass barrier. All my face. All trying to break through. I told myself I wouldn't go back. Spent the whole week trying to convince myself it had been a hallucination. Gas leak in the basement, maybe, or a really vivid dream. But then I saw her at Powell's. Actually, no. First, I need to tell you about the notebook. Wednesday morning, I woke up to find my journal on the kitchen table. The one I keep in my nightstand drawer. Always. It was open to yesterday's entry, except I hadn't written anything yesterday. The handwriting was mine, though. Every loop and slash exactly how I form my letters. The meeting was wonderful, it read. Finally found others who understand. Can't wait for next Tuesday. Below that, in fresher ink, don't trust Prime Sarah. She's not what she seems. And below that, in pencil, check your voicemails. I had 17 new voicemails. All from unknown numbers. All the same voice, my voice. Whispering variations of the same message. She's collecting us. Don't let her complete the set. The drowning dreams are the key. I deleted them all, but they kept coming back. Every time I checked, 17 voicemails. Always 17. That's when I saw her at Powell's. Wednesday afternoon, I was reshuffling in the fiction section when I glanced toward the information desk. Sarah, with glasses, stood there, helping a customer find a cookbook. My supervisor walked right past her, nodding a greeting like she'd worked there for years. She caught me staring, winked, then went back to her customer as if it was the most normal thing in the world. Thursday, I saw 2 more. One in the coffee shop across the street, reading the exact book I'd bought but hadn't started yet. Another waiting at my usual bus stop, wearing the rain jacket I'd almost purchased last month but decided was too expensive. By Monday, I was seeing them everywhere. Not just glimpses, full sightings. Sarah's living their parallel lives in my city, shopping at my grocery store. Walking dogs in my neighborhood, dogs that looked suspiciously like the golden retriever I'd grown up with. I started taking different routes to work, shopping at different times. But it didn't matter. Portland was filling up with Sarah's, and only I seemed to notice. Anna didn't see them. When I pointed out Sarah from Beaverton at the food carts, Anna just saw a stranger. When I mentioned running into someone from group therapy at Powell's, my supervisor said I was the only Sarah on the schedule. Tuesday came again. I sat in my car outside St. Mary's for 20 minutes this time, watching. I counted 15 women entering through that side door, all my height, all with my walk, that slightly pigeon-toed gait I'd tried to correct in college. I went in. The circle was bigger now. 20 chairs, all full except one. They'd been waiting for me. "Welcome back," Prime Sarah said. "We're so glad you came." The meeting started the same way. Introductions, stories. But something was different. The other Sarahs looked tired, drawn, like they hadn't been sleeping. "The dreams are getting worse," one said. Sarah from Milwaukee, apparently. When had out-of-state Sarahs started showing up? I can feel myself drowning, even when I'm awake now. murmurs of agreement around the circle. "It's the convergence," Prime Sarah said. "We're getting closer." "Closer to what?" I asked. She looked at me with those familiar green eyes, but there was something else there now, something hungry, to becoming whole. The room felt smaller suddenly. The fluorescent light flickered again, and in the darkness between, I thought I saw more faces, more Sarahs, standing in the shadows outside our circle, watching, waiting. "You see them too," Glasses Sarah said. It wasn't a question. The ones who haven't found their way to group yet. They're drawn to us, but they can't quite cross over. Cross over from where? From all the places we could have been. Prime Sarah stood, began walking around the outside of the circle. Every choice creates a branch. Every moment splits reality. We're the Sarahs who made slightly different choices, but stayed close enough to overlap. That's not how physics works. Isn't it? She was behind me now. I could feel her breath on my neck. My breath. How many times have you stood at a crossroads and felt yourself split? Felt the other you, the one who made the different choice, walking away? Too many times. The job offer in Seattle I'd turned down. The apartment in Northeast I'd almost rented. The marriage proposal I'd said no to. "He proposed to you too?" a Sarah across the circle whispered. "David?" I nodded, throat tight. "I said yes," she continued. "Biggest mistake of my life. He was..." She stopped. We all knew what he was, what he'd done, or almost done, or would have done. The branches are collapsing. Prime Sarah returned to her seat. All the scattered Sarahs, all the possibilities, were coming together. The dreams are the first sign. Soon. Soon what? She smiled. We all smiled. The same sad, knowing smile. Soon there will only be one. The meeting ended abruptly. Again, that careful filing out, no touching. But as I reached the door, I felt a hand on my arm. Cold, too cold. I turned. It wasn't one of the Sarahs from the circle. This one was wrong. Her face was mine, but blurred, like a photograph taken through water. Her clothes were soaked, dripping onto the linoleum floor. "Don't come back," she whispered. Her voice was full of water. "It's not what you think. The convergence, it's not..." She flickered, disappeared, left only a puddle where she'd stood. But there was something in the puddle. A photograph. Waterlogged but visible. It showed all of us Sarahs standing in a circle. But we weren't in the basement. We were somewhere else, somewhere dark. And in the center, where Prime Sarah should have been, nothing. Just a black void shaped like a person. I pocketed the photo and ran. Up the stairs, through the side door, across the parking lot. 23 silver Honda Civics sat under the streetlights. I didn't know which was mine. They all had the same fuzzy dice, the same parking stickers, the same... But one had something different. A piece of paper under the windshield wiper. My handwriting again. Third from the left, trust yourself. Sarah who remembers. I picked the third car from the left. The key worked, of course it did. As I drove away, I saw them in the windows of the community center. Dozens of Sarahs, all watching, all waiting, all me. I tried to leave Portland. Wednesday morning, I packed a bag, called in sick to Powell's, and drove toward Seattle. Maybe distance would break whatever this was. Maybe I could outrun myself. I made it as far as Longview before I saw the roadblock. Not a police roadblock. A Sarah roadblock. 20 of them standing across I-5, all wearing the same rain jacket I had on. Cars passed right through them like they weren't there, but I could see them, and they could see me. I turned around. The dreams weren't dreams anymore. I was drowning all the time now, even with my eyes open. Water in my lungs that no one else could see. That glass barrier pressing down, covered with faces. My face. All trying to break through from their side. But Thursday night something different happened. In the dream, one of the faces pressed against the glass held up a sign. "She's listening. Find the first Sarah." I woke up gasping. My sheets were soaked, but not with sweat. With lake water, I could smell it. That particular mix of algae and mud and something else. Something familiar. Lake Oswego, where one of the Sarahs said she was from. I called in sick Friday and drove out to Lake Oswego. I didn't know what I was looking for until I saw it. Millennium Plaza Park. The lake where I'd almost drowned when I was 8. Where my parents had pulled me out just in time. Where I'd seen, no, that was impossible. But I remembered now. Under the water, I'd seen another girl. She looked just like me. She was reaching up, trying to break through something invisible. I'd told my parents, but they said it was just oxygen deprivation. Hallucinations. The lake was calm that morning. Empty except for a woman sitting on the dock. She turned as I approached. Another Sarah, but this one was different. Older, maybe 40, 45. She smiled sadly. "You're starting to remember," she said. "Good. That means there's still time." "Time for what? Who are you?" "I'm Sarah," she said. "The first Sarah to escape her, or maybe the last. Time gets funny when you're stuck between possibilities." She patted the dock beside her. I sat, maintaining distance. 23 years ago, she said, I found a flyer, just like you, went to a support group, just like you. But back then she was calling herself Dr. Chen. My blood went cold. My therapist's name is Dr. Chen. Of course it is. She's been setting this up for months, years maybe, planting the seeds of doubt, making you question yourself, making you ready to see the flyer. But Dr. Chen is real. She has an office, other patients. She's as real as she needs to be. She feeds on doubt, on fractured identity, and what better way to create that than to slowly convince someone they're not whole, that they need to find themselves. The lake water lapped at the dock. In its surface I saw reflections. Not just mine and hers. Dozens of Sarahs, all at different ages, all trapped just beneath. The convergence isn't about bringing us together, older Sarah continued. It's about consuming us. Every Sarah she collects makes her stronger, more real, more able to hunt. So, stop going to the meetings. Warn the others. She laughed bitterly. You think you're the first to try. I've been warning Sarahs for 23 years, but once you've seen the flyer, once you've felt that pull, you always go back. The doubt she's planted is too strong. Then what do? Find the real first Sarah, the original, before she was split, before the doubt took hold. She's the key to stopping this. How do I find her? Older Sarah stood, brushing off her jeans. Same way you found me. Remember the first time you felt split. The first time you wondered if you were real. Before the therapy, before the dreams. Remember. She walked away, leaving me alone on the dock. In the lake's reflection, the trapped Sarahs pressed against the surface, all mouthing the same word. Remember. Tuesday came again. This time I didn't drive to St. Mary's. I walked. In the rain, without an umbrella. I was already drowning. What was a little more water? The side door was propped open, waiting. The basement hummed with voices. Not just from room B12, every room. All the voices mine. I pushed open the door to B12. The circle had expanded to fill the entire room. 50 Sarahs? 100? I couldn't count them all. Some were clear, present, solid. Others flickered like bad reception. A few were waterlogged, dripping, wrong. She's here, they said in unison. The last one. Prime Sarah stood in the center of the circle. She looked less like me now, or more like me. It was hard to tell. Her edges kept shifting, absorbing the features of the Sarahs around her. Do you understand now? She asked. We were never meant to be separate. All these branches, these possibilities, they're collapsing. Reality is correcting itself. By drowning us? by converging us, the dreams, the water. It's the space between possibilities. We're all swimming toward the same point, the same self. What happens to the others? To all of you? She tilted her head. Our head. That thinking gesture. We become what we were always meant to be. One Sarah, complete, whole. No more feeling split, no more sensing the lives we didn't live. Just one. And if I don't want that, the room went silent. 100 green eyes stared at me. You don't have a choice, Prime Sarah said softly. None of us do. It's already happening. Can't you feel it? I could. The edges of my vision were blurring. I could see through my eyes and through the eyes of the Sarah next to me. Could feel my heart beating in 50 different chests. The drowning sensation wasn't water. It was us. All of us. Merging. Fight it, a voice whispered. The waterlogged Sarah from last week. She stood just outside the circle, flickering in and out of existence. The convergence isn't natural. She pointed at Prime Sarah. She's not the original. She's the one who... She disappeared mid-sentence, but I understood. Prime Sarah smiled. My smile, but wrong. The original is such a limiting concept. I'm the Sarah who figured it out, who found a way to gather all the scattered pieces, to become complete. You're killing them. Us. I'm saving us. No more loneliness. No more wondering what if. Just one perfect Sarah with all the experiences, all the memories, all the possibilities. The circle began to close. Sarahs standing, moving inward. Their faces blurred together, a kaleidoscope of myself. I backed toward the door, but it slammed shut. It's time, Prime Sarah said. Join us. Join yourself. The drowning hit me full force, not water, awareness. I could feel every choice I'd ever made and not made. Every path taken and abandoned. Every Sarah that had ever existed or could exist. The weight of infinite possibilities crushing down. I fell to my knees. Around me, Sarahs began to merge, 2 becoming 1, 4 becoming 2, 8 becoming 4. The room spun with the impossibility of it. Stop fighting, Prime Sarah knelt beside me. Her hand on my shoulder was warm and cold and wet and dry all at once. Let go. Become whole. I closed my eyes. Let the convergence take me. But, there was something else. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw her. Another Sarah, standing apart from the convergence, watching, waiting. She looked exactly like me, but her eyes were blue. I gasped, pulled back from the merging. Blue eyes. I'd always wanted blue eyes as a kid, used to imagine myself with them. But that wasn't a possibility, wasn't a choice. And that was just imagination. You're not collecting possibilities, I said, pushing away from Prime Sarah. You're collecting something else. The merging stopped. The room held its breath. Prime Sarah's face flickered. For just a moment I saw something else underneath. Not me. Never me. Clever, she said, but it wasn't my voice anymore. Too clever. The other Sarahs began to wake up, the merging reversing. They looked around, confused, afraid, real. What are you? I asked the thing wearing my face. She smiled, not my smile, something older, hungrier. I'm the space between, she said. The doubt, the voice that says you're not real, not worthy, not enough. I feed on that uncertainty, and you Sarahs, so full of doubt, so easy to gather, so easy to consume. The room exploded into chaos. Sarahs running, screaming, fighting to get out. The thing that had been Prime Sarah laughed, its form shifting, revealing something vast and dark and empty. I ran, we all ran. Up the stairs, out the door, into the rain. Behind us, St. Mary's Community Center groaned and shuddered. Windows shattered. The building seemed to fold in on itself, collapsing into that impossible basement room. In the parking lot, we stopped. 40, 50, 60 Sarahs. All real, All separate, all free. "What do we do now? Glasses?" Sarah asked. I looked at her, at all of them. My faces, but not my lives. Each one a real person who'd been caught by that thing's web. "We live," I said, "separately, as ourselves. No more support group, no more convergence, just us." They nodded. One by one, they got into their silver Honda Civics and drove away. Back to their lives, their choices, their possibilities. I was the last to leave. As I reached my car, my actual car, with the coffee stain on the passenger seat and the crack in the windshield, I turned back. St. Mary's Community Center stood intact, no broken windows, no collapse, just an old brick building in the rain. But in the basement window I saw a shadow, waiting, hunting, looking for the next group of people who felt like they were drowning in their own lives. That was 6 months ago. I still work at Powell's, still live alone with Biscuit, still have the dreams sometimes. But now I know the difference between possibility and predator, between doubt and danger, and sometimes in the city I see another Sarah. We nod, we smile, we keep walking. We're not alone, but we're ourselves. And that thing in the basement? It's still there, still hunting, still wearing faces that aren't quite right. So, if you see a flyer for a support group, for people who feel lost, split, uncertain, who feel like they're drowning in their own lives, keep walking. Some connections aren't meant to be made, some groups aren't meant to meet. And some faces, even if they look exactly like yours, aren't meant to smile back. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night, the thing I didn't tell the other Sarahs, the thing I can barely admit to myself. I kept the flyer. It's in my desk drawer, still blank to everyone but me, still whispering promises of understanding, of connection, of becoming whole. Because even knowing what I know, even after everything, sometimes I still feel like I'm drowning, and sometimes I wonder if that thing in the basement was wrong, or if it was the only one who truly understood, the only one who knew what it felt like to be scattered, the only one who offered to make us whole. Last week I saw Dr. Chen again. Not my Dr. Chen, the real one. She was confused when I showed up for an appointment I hadn't scheduled, concerned when I asked about identity issues and support groups. "Sarah," she said gently, "I've never recommended group therapy for you, and I certainly wouldn't send you to some basement meeting. Are you feeling all right?" I laughed, actually laughed, because what else could I do? She prescribed me something for anxiety. I didn't feel it. Pills can't fix what's broken when the break is in reality itself. But yesterday I found something, another notebook, hidden in my closet, behind boxes I'd never opened, filled with my handwriting. Page after page of the same sentence. The first Sarah is in the mirror, and at the very back, in handwriting that was mine but shaky, old. "Don't look too long." She looks back. I haven't looked in a mirror since. Can't bring myself to, because I know that when I do, I'll see her. The original, the one who started all this when she first doubted herself. When she first wondered if she was real. When she first split. The flyer is still in my drawer, still calling, and every Tuesday at 7 p.m. I sit in my car outside St. Mary's, watching the others go in, counting how many Sarahs enter, counting how many leave. The numbers never match, and in my dreams, I'm not drowning anymore. I'm floating, suspended between the surface and the bottom, between real and not, between one and many, waiting for the next Sarah to find the flyer, waiting for the cycle to begin again. Because that's the real horror, isn't it? Not that there are multiple versions of us, not that something hunts us through our doubt. It's that we do this to ourselves, over and over, Sarah after Sarah, group after group, all looking for connection, all finding consumption, all keeping the flyer, just in case. Sweet dreams. Oh, and one more thing. If you're listening to this at night, if you're alone, if you've ever felt like you're not quite yourself, check your desk drawer. You might be surprised what you find. Or who finds you. Story number 2. The smell hit me first. Not grain dust or diesel fumes from the trucks. Something else. Sweet. Wrong. Like meat left too long in August heat. I stood at the edge of Miller's cornfield, staring at that towering grain silo against the Nebraska sunset, and I knew. I finally knew why nobody in Hartsville talked about what happened to the Johansson twins. But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, if you're listening to this right now, lying in bed, maybe with your headphones on, you need to understand something. What I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up campfire tale. This happened. And somewhere out there, in another small farming town just like mine, it's probably happening again. So, before I tell you my story, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, but because after you hear this, you're going to want to warn others. You're going to need to share this, trust me. All right, deep breath, here we go. My name's Tyler Brennan, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew everything about Hartsville, Nebraska. Population 2,847, 1 stoplight, 2 churches, 3 bars, and that massive grain silo on the edge of town that nobody, and I mean nobody, ever talked about. I just come back from college in Lincoln. 4 years studying agricultural science, thinking I'd help modernize our family farm. Dad picked me up from the bus station in his beat-up F-150, country music crackling through blown speakers. Everything felt exactly the same. The water tower still needed painting. Mrs. Henderson's roses still grew wild over her fence. Even the temperature on the bank sign still blinked between time and temperature like it had since 1987. "Good to have you home, son," Dad said. But his smile seemed tight, forced. That first week back was strange. Not obviously strange, just off. Like when you know a storm's coming hours before the clouds roll in. People would start conversations, then trail off mid-sentence. Groups would scatter when I walked into Donnie's diner. And everyone kept glancing toward the grain silo. It stood there like it always had. 120 feet of weathered concrete and steel, built back in '58 according to the faded sign, but something was different. Took me 3 days to figure out what. No birds. You ever notice how birds love grain silos? Pigeons, sparrows, even crows. They're always perched on them, diving for spilled grain. But not this one, not a single bird within 50 yards of it. I asked Dad about it over dinner, just casual-like, while Mom served her famous pot roast. Hey, why doesn't anyone use the old silo anymore? The sound of forks hitting plates was deafening. Mom's hand shook as she poured gravy. Dad stared at his food like it held the secrets of the universe. My younger sister Emma, usually couldn't shut up about her high school drama, suddenly found her green beans fascinating. Some things, Dad finally said, are better left alone, Tyler. That's when I knew. Whatever was wrong in Hartsville, it started with that silo. I spent the next few days asking around. Subtle questions at first. Jim at the hardware store just shook his head and walked to the back room. Sarah at the post office pretended she didn't hear me. Even my best friend from high school, Marcus, just laughed nervously and changed the subject. But I kept pushing. And finally, someone talked. It was old Pete, 92 years old, half-blind, and usually drunk by noon. I found him on his porch, bourbon in hand, staring at nothing. "You really want to know about the silo, college boy?" I nodded. He took a long swig. "Built in '58, like the sign says. Worked fine for, 20 years. Then in '78 something changed." "Changed how?" His milky eyes found mine. Grain started disappearing. Not stolen, just gone. 100 tons here, 50 tons there. Silos don't just leak grain, boy. It goes somewhere. So they stopped using it. Oh, they tried to fix it. Brought in engineers, inspectors. Found nothing wrong. He leaned forward, bourbon breath hot on my face. Then the Holbrook girl went missing. My blood chilled. Missing? Little Amy Holbrook, 8 years old, playing hide-and-seek with her cousins. They found her shoe. He pointed a trembling finger toward the silo. Right at the base, never found nothing else. But that could have been, then, the Carver boy in 82, the Martinez kid in 89, the Johansson twins in 07. His voice dropped to a whisper. Always children. Always near the silo. Always gone. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as a small-town superstition, but the fear in his eyes was real. Pete, what do you think happened to them? He drained his glass. You ever hear grain settle at night, boy? Make sounds. Creaking, shifting. But sometimes if you listen real close and you can hear something else in there, something big. Something that ain't got no business being in no grain silo. That night I couldn't sleep. Pete's words echoed in my head. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize everything. Kids go missing sometimes. It's tragic, but it happens. And grain silos make noise, that's physics. Thermal expansion. Settling, nothing supernatural about it. But at 2 a.m. I gave up and got dressed. The town was dead quiet, no cars. No lights, except the street lamps buzzing with moths. I walked down Main Street, past the darkened shops, toward the edge of town where the silo waited. It looked different at night. Bigger, somehow. The moon was full, casting long shadows across Miller's cornfield. The silo stood like a monument to... what? Progress? Or something else? I stopped about 30 feet away, close enough to see details, but far enough to run if I needed to. God, why was I even thinking that? The structure was solid concrete, with a steel access door at the base and another higher up for maintenance. Ladder rungs were built into the side. Everything looked normal. Abandoned, sure, but normal. Then I heard it. A sound from inside, not grain settling, not metal creaking. Something else. Like breathing, but too big, too deep, like something massive filling its lungs. I took a step back, then another. The breathing stopped, and then, I swear to God, something moved inside. The whole structure seemed to shift slightly. Dust fell from invisible cracks, and from somewhere deep within came a sound that made my spine turn to ice. A child's laughter. Faint, echoing, wrong. I ran, sprinted back to my truck and drove home with my hands shaking on the wheel. But I couldn't let it go. Whatever was in there, whatever took those kids, someone had to do something. I started researching the next day. Town records, newspaper archives, everything I could find about the silo and the missing children. What I found made no sense. The silo was built by Hartsville Grain Company in 1958. Normal construction, normal operation. Then in 1978, exactly like Pete said, they started reporting grain losses. Massive losses. The company brought in expert after expert. They found no leaks, no theft, no explanation. Then I found the inspection report from 1979. The inspector, a man named David Walsh, noted something odd. The interior dimensions didn't match the exterior. According to his measurements, the silo was 15 feet narrower on the inside than it should have been. 15 feet of solid concrete? That made no sense. Unless something else was in there. Something that needed space. I dug deeper, found construction photos from 1958. Normal silo build, except there were gaps in the photo record. 3 weeks in September where no progress photos were taken. When they resumed, the silo was nearly complete. What happened during those 3 weeks? I was so absorbed in research I didn't hear Emma come into my room. "Tyler, you need to stop." I spun around. My 17-year-old sister stood in the doorway, face pale. "Stop what?" "Asking about the silo. Mom and Dad are scared. Everyone's scared." "Emma, what do you know?" She bit her lip, looked over her shoulder, then closed the door. "Remember when I was 12? That summer I went to stay with Aunt Carol in Omaha?" I nodded. I didn't go to Aunt Carol's. Her voice was barely a whisper. I went to the silo one night with Rebecca and Julie. We were doing that stupid Charlie challenge. Thought it would be funny to do it somewhere creepy. My blood ran cold. "Emma, we were there maybe 5 minutes when we heard it. The breathing. Then Rebecca said she saw eyes. Glowing eyes in the access hatch. We ran, but..." She was shaking now. "But Rebecca didn't make it home." "What do you mean?" "She was right behind us, right there. But when we got to Main Street, she was gone. We went back, found her bike. But Rebecca was just gone." "Emma, why didn't you..." "They found her 3 days later, walking out of Miller's cornfield, no memory of what happened. But Tyler..." She grabbed my arm. "She was different after. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep, just kept drawing pictures of eyes. Huge eyes. And 3 months later, her family moved away. No forwarding address, no goodbye." The room felt colder. "There are others," Emma whispered. "Kids who got too close and survived. But they all leave, every single one. It's like it marks them somehow." After Emma left, I sat in the dark thinking. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave, go back to Lincoln, pretend I never came home, but another part, the stubborn part that got me through college, needed answers. I spent the next week watching the silo, not approaching it, just watching. Parked my truck at different spots around town where I could see it. Made notes, looking for patterns, and I found them. Every third night, around 3 a.m., lights would flicker inside. Not electric lights, something softer, like bioluminescence. They'd pulse in patterns, almost like communication. Delivery trucks avoided that side of town completely. I followed one driver to Donnie's diner and bought him coffee. After 3 cups and a promise I wouldn't use his name, he talked. GPS goes haywire near that thing, compass spins, radio turns to static. Company policy is to take the long way around. Been that way since before I started driving. How long's that? 15 years, but my dad drove grain trucks too. Said it was the same in his day. I showed him the inspection report about the dimensions. He studied it, frowning. That can't be right. You can't have space just disappear like that. Unless it's not empty space." He pushed the paper back. "Look, kid, I got a family, mortgage. I don't ask questions about that place, and neither should you." But I couldn't stop. The next morning, I went to the library. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian since forever, watched me pull book after book about local history. "Tyler Brennan," she finally said. "Some knowledge ain't worth having. Mrs. Patterson, please, I just want to understand." She looked around the empty library, sighed, then disappeared into the back room. She returned with a leather journal, brittle with age. This was my grandmother's. She helped build that silo. Was the company secretary? She handed it to me. "Read it, then burn it, and never speak of it again." I took the journal home, locked my door, and read. The entries started normal. Supply orders, worker schedules, progress reports. Then came September 1958. September 3rd, Mr. Hartsville brought in special consultants today. Foreign men, don't speak English. They're modifying the blueprints. September 7th, night work only now. Workers sworn to secrecy, extra pay to keep quiet. September 15th, something went wrong last night. 3 workers missing. Mr. Hartsville says they quit, but their trucks are still here. September 18th, the consultants brought something. A container. Metal, covered in symbols. They built it into the foundation. I wasn't supposed to see. September 22nd, it's in there now. God help us. It's in there. The consultants are gone. Mr. Hartsville says everything is fine. But I hear it at night, we all do. September 30th, grand opening tomorrow. Mr. Hartsville says if anyone talks, their families will suffer. I believe him. May God forgive us for what we've done. The entries stopped there. I sat back, mind reeling. They built something into the silo. Deliberately. But what? And why? That night, I made a decision. Maybe stupid, definitely dangerous. But I had to know. I gathered supplies. Flashlight, rope, camera, knife, though I didn't know what good it would do. At 2 a.m., I drove to the silo. The access door was padlocked, but the lock was old, rusted. 5 minutes with a crowbar and it snapped. The door swung open on silent hinges. The smell hit me immediately. That same sweet rot stench from before, but stronger. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The beam cut through darkness, revealing nothing. Empty space. Concrete walls curving up into blackness, but the dimensions were wrong. Just like the report said. The space was too small. I played my light along the walls. Smooth concrete except there, about 10 feet up. Symbols carved deep. The same kind mentioned in the journal? I pulled out my camera, started taking pictures. The flash lit up the space in stark bursts. That's when I saw them. Scratches, hundreds of them. Names carved desperately into the concrete. Help me, Mommy, it hurts, and among them, Amy H., 1978. My hands shook. These were... The breathing started, deep, rhythmic, coming from the walls themselves. I backed toward the door, the breathing got louder, and then the walls moved, bulged outward like something massive pressing against them from inside. From somewhere above came that child's laughter again. But now I could hear what it really was. Not laughter, crying, dozens of children crying in unison. I ran for the door. It slammed shut. The padlock was broken. The door should have opened, but it didn't budge. I threw my shoulder against it. Nothing. The breathing was deafening now. The walls pulsed with each inhale. And from the darkness above, something descended. Not quickly, slowly, deliberately, like it was savoring the moment. I pressed against the door, flashlight beam dancing wildly. The thing came into view and my mind simply refused. Couldn't process what I was seeing. Eyes, dozens of them, but not arranged on any face, just clustered, watching, and behind them something that might have been flesh but moved like liquid. A voice spoke, not from any mouth, from everywhere. From inside my own head, finally, another. The thing descended further and I saw, God, I saw too much. The eyes weren't eyes. They were faces, children's faces, absorbed into something that pulsed and writhed like living tissue. Amy Holbrook's face was there, twisted, screaming silently. The Johansson twins. Others I didn't recognize. So hungry. The voice was many voices. Child voices, speaking in horrible unison. So long since feeding. I pressed harder against the door, praying, begging. The metal was ice cold despite the summer heat. The thing reached what might have been an appendage toward me. It moved wrong. Joints in places that shouldn't have joints. As it got closer, I felt pulling, like something inside me was being drawn out. Join us, Tyler. How did it know my name? We know all who live here, waiting, watching, from inside. The appendage touched the wall next to my head. Where it made contact, the concrete dissolved, not melted, dissolved, like it was being digested. That's when I understood. This thing, it didn't just live in the silo, it was the silo. The concrete, the steel, just a shell, a cocoon, and we'd been feeding it grain for 20 years before it got hungry for something else. The door suddenly gave way. I tumbled backward into the night, scrambling in the dirt. Behind me, that chorus of children's voices rose to a wail. "Come back! Come back!" I ran, drove home, packed everything I could fit in my truck. Mom cried. Dad just nodded like he understood. Emma hugged me and whispered, "Don't come back." But before I left, I had to do one thing. I drove to the newspaper office, broke in, used their computer to upload everything, the photos, the journal entries, all of it. Posted it everywhere I could think of, news sites, social media, forums, anywhere people might see. By morning, I was 3 states away, but I kept checking online, watching, waiting. The posts disappeared, every single one, wiped clean like they never existed. But not before some people saw. Downloaded, shared. The truth was out there now, spreading like wildfire in dark corners of the internet. Hartsville's population started dropping, families leaving in the night. By winter, the town was half empty. The state tried to investigate, but their equipment failed near the silo. Investigators got sick, had nightmares, left without answers. Last I heard, they're planning to demolish it. Bring in the Army Corps of Engineers. Tons of explosives, level the whole thing. They don't understand. It's not in the silo, it is the silo. And it's hungry. So why am I telling you this? Because Hartsville isn't unique. I've been researching, tracking patterns, grain silos built in the 1950s, modified construction, missing children, towns that don't talk about it. I've found 17 so far. 17 towns with 17 silos with 17 secrets. Maybe there's one near you. Maybe you've driven past it 100 times. That old silo on the edge of town that nobody uses anymore. The one birds avoid. The one that makes sounds at night. Don't go looking. Don't be like me. But if you know, if you suspect, leave. Just leave. Don't ask questions. Don't investigate. Just go. Because they're hungry, all of them. And they're waiting. Waiting for someone curious, someone brave, someone stupid, someone like I was. The scratches on my arm haven't healed. 3 parallel lines where that thing touched me through my jacket. They don't hurt. But sometimes, late at night, they move. Pulse with their own rhythm. And when they do, I dream. I dream of eyes in the darkness, of children crying, of concrete walls that breathe, and worst of all, I dream of going back. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about monsters. The real horror isn't that they exist. It's that once they touch you, part of you wants to return, needs to return. That's why all those families moved away. It's why I keep driving. 3 states, 5 states, 8 states. Doesn't matter. I can still feel it calling. So, please, if you're listening to this in bed right now, if you're thinking about that old structure in your town, that abandoned building, that place nobody talks about, don't just hit subscribe. Share this story, warn others. Because somewhere out there, in the heartland of America, in small towns with 1 stoplight and 2 churches, something big lives in the grain silos, and it's spreading. Sweet dreams. Oh, one more thing. If you're from Hartsville, if you recognize the names, the places, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what's coming, because last night, the scratches on my arm spelled out a message. Time to come home. And God help me. I think I'm going to listen. Wait, before you go, before you close this video thinking it's just another story, I need to tell you what happened yesterday. Why I'm really uploading this now. Why time is running out. I've been on the road for 3 weeks since leaving Hartsville, staying in motels, paying cash, different name each time. But yesterday, I woke up in my car parked outside a grain elevator in Kansas. Don't remember driving there. Don't remember stopping. My GPS history was wiped clean, the scratches on my arm. They'd grown. What started as 3 lines now sprawled up to my elbow, looking like a map. Roads and intersections spelled out in raised flesh, and at the center, a perfect circle, a silo. I recognized the intersection, County Road 47 and Highway 12, right outside Millfield, Iowa. I'd driven through Millfield once. Cute town, white picket fences, American flags on every porch, and a grain silo on the north end that looked exactly like Hartsville's. Same era, same construction, same dead zone where birds wouldn't fly. I tried to ignore it, threw out my phone, bought a new one, kept driving. But that night, I had the dream again. Except this time, I wasn't in Hartsville's silo. I was in all of them, 17 silos, 17 sets of eyes. But they weren't separate creatures. They were connected, like organs in some massive body stretched across the Midwest. And in the dream, I could feel them breathing together, synchronized, waiting. And I saw the children, not absorbed into the walls like in Hartsville. These were different. Walking around their towns, going to school, playing in parks, normal kids living normal lives. Except they all had the same scratches, hidden under sleeves and jackets, pulsing with that same wrong rhythm. And their eyes. When they looked at each other, there was recognition, understanding, like they were all part of something bigger. I woke up screaming. The motel manager was pounding on my door, threatening to call the cops. I grabbed my stuff and ran, but in the parking lot I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 years old, standing by the ice machine at 4 a.m. She rolled up her sleeve, showing me 3 parallel scratches. "He says you're ready," she whispered. "He says it's time to come home. All of us. To all of them." She walked away, and I saw others, stepping out of rooms, out of cars, all ages, all with those same marks, moving in the same direction, north, toward Millfield. I should have run the other way, should have driven south until I hit Ocean, but the scratches burned, and my hands turned the wheel north without my permission. The convoy grew as we drove, cars joining from every side road, license plates from all over, Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri. Dozens of us, then hundreds, all silent, all marked, all going home. We reached Millfield at sunrise. The town was empty, like everyone knew to leave. Storefronts dark, streets deserted. Only the silo stood waiting, but it looked different, bigger. The concrete seemed to pulse with anticipation. We parked in neat rows, got out in unison, walked toward it like sleepwalkers. I tried to resist, but my legs weren't mine anymore. The little girl from the motel took my hand. Her touch was ice cold. "Don't fight it," she said. "It's easier if you don't fight." The silo door was open. Not the ground level door. That was still padlocked. This was a new opening, organic, like the concrete had split apart to form a mouth. We lined up, a single file. The first person walked in and vanished into the darkness. Then the next, and the next. No screams, no struggle, just acceptance. I was 20th in line, 19th, 18th. Close enough now to see inside, to see what waited. It wasn't darkness in there, it was something worse. Space that didn't follow rules. Geometry that hurt to perceive. And floating in that impossible space, the children. All the missing children from 70 years. Not dead, not alive. Something in between. Connected by threads of light to something massive and ancient and hungry. 10 people ahead, 9, 8. That's when I felt it. The full weight of what was happening. This wasn't just feeding time, this was reproduction, division. The thing in Hartsville was sending out spores, human spores, to seed new silos, new towns, new hunting grounds. 5 people ahead, 4. The little girl squeezed my hand. "It's beautiful inside," she said. "You'll see. We all float. We all dream. We all become." 3, 2. I stood at the threshold. The space beyond defied understanding, but I could see them all. The missing children, the absorbed ones, floating like stars in an organic cosmos, their faces peaceful, their eyes empty, their mouths moving in unison, speaking words in no human language. "Come," they said with one voice. "Come home." My foot lifted, started to step forward. The scratches on my arm blazed with joy, and then my phone rang. The spell shattered, just for a second. But a second was enough. I yanked my hand from the girl's grip and ran. Behind me, hundreds of voices rose in frustration. The phone kept ringing. Unknown number. I answered while running. "Tyler!" Emma's voice, my sister. "Tyler, I know you threw away your phone, but I had to try. I've been calling random numbers all night. Tyler, if this is you, the Army, they're not going to demolish just Hartsville. They know about all of them. They're going to hit them all at once. Operation Grain Dust, you have minutes, maybe less. Get away from..." The line went dead, but I heard them. Helicopters. Distant but approaching fast. I reached my car, gunned it. In the rearview mirror, I saw the others still walking into the silo, still calm, still willing. The little girl stood at the entrance watching me go. She waved goodbye. The first missile hit when I was 2 miles out. The explosion was wrong. Not fire and debris, something else. Like reality tearing, the silo didn't explode, it imploded, folded in on itself. And for just a moment, I saw what was really inside. God help us all. It wasn't 17 creatures in 17 silos. It was one creature. One impossible thing stretched across states, using the silos like breathing tubes, like fingers pushed up through the earth. And we just cut off 17 fingers. The thing screamed, not with sound, with something deeper. The ground cracked, the sky flickered, every car alarm for 50 miles went off at once, and in that scream I heard pain, rage, and worst of all, promise. The scratches on my arm are words now, clear as day, burned into my skin. You cannot kill what does not live. You cannot stop what has already spread. We are in the grain. We are in the soil. We are in you. So that's why I'm uploading this now, right now, before they find me, before the scratches spread further, before I become like the others. Because the Army thinks they won. 17 silos destroyed. Threat eliminated. But they're wrong. Those weren't the only ones. I found more, built in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, different designs, different disguises, water towers, radio antennas, even church steeples in the right towns, all of them connected, all of them breathing, all of them waiting. And the children, the marked ones, who walked into Millfield. Some escaped the explosion. They're out there now, walking, driving, flying, spreading to new towns, new structures, new hunting grounds. The scratches have reached my shoulder now. By tomorrow they'll reach my neck, then my face. Then I'll stop running, stop fighting, and I'll find the nearest structure that fits the pattern. And I'll walk inside, and I'll become another voice in the chorus. Unless you stop me. Stop us. Stop it. Look for the signs. Structures that birds avoid. Places where electronics fail. Towns with too many missing children and not enough questions. Document everything. Share everything. Make so much noise they can't silence you all, because it's not over. It's just beginning. And somewhere out there, maybe in your town, maybe in mine, something big is waiting to be born. The scratches are moving again, forming new words. I have to go, have to drive, have to... No, I won't look. Won't read what they're spelling now. Won't. Upload complete. Come home now. If you're still listening, still watching, remember this. Remember all of it. Share it, save it, before they delete this too. And if you see me, if you see any of us, the ones with scratches, the ones who walk toward empty places, don't follow, don't help, just run. Run, and never stop running. Because we're not ourselves anymore. We're something else, something hungry,